Helena Wintour was a wealthy 17th century English Catholic woman from the county of Worcestershire. She was, by all accounts, a remarkable woman who lived through one of the most turbulent periods in British history. Helena's extraordinary creativity marks her out as a distinctive female visual artist of considerable talent. But, for reasons which will become obvious, her work was hidden away. Helena's life and work deserve to be better known. This short film hopes to bring her extraordinary story out of obscurity and to allow her work to be appreciated in its full glory. Helena was a recusant, the term for a Catholic who refused to attend the mandatory state church services. She chose to hold fast to her own religion, which was at that time banned by English law. Recusants suffered severe penalties for this defiance: heavy fines, restrictions of liberty and movement, imprisonment, and even execution. Throughout her adult life, Helena acted illegally by sheltering Catholic priests. She carried out numerous local acts of charity, bringing relief to beleaguered and impoverished Catholic neighbours. Helena also cared for her wider family, making repeated financial and personal sacrifices. This was a time when it was universally presumed that women would marry, with an alternative option for English Catholics of entering a convent overseas. Helena, controversially, chose neither path, instead opting to remain single and to pursue a life of intellectual and artistic creativity. She read widely, drawing on philosophy, poetry, literature, and Catholic spiritual writings to create vestments with complex symbolic embroidered images containing embedded secret codes. The vestments she created were intended to be used in clandestine, illegal celebrations of the Catholic Mass, worn by priests whose lives were in danger as long as they remained on English soil. For Helena to be associated with these underground Catholic priests was a highly dangerous act, for which many of her countrymen and women had already been executed. Yet Helena frequently embroidered her name on her creations, a bold act of defiance in the face of the stringent penalties she faced if her work fell into the wrong hands. To truly appreciate Helena's vestments and to fully understand her strength, commitment, and courage, we must look at her life story. And as we discover more about her, we uncover a paradox. Her breathtakingly beautiful embroideries, which are so full of vibrancy, hope, and colour, arose out of a personal life that was repeatedly touched by tragedy. Helena was born around 1600 into a well-to-do Catholic family living at Huddington Court in Worcestershire. At the age of 5, her life changed irrevocably when her father, Robert Wintour, and her uncle, Thomas, were drawn into the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. A group of young Catholic men, led by Robert Catesby and Guy Fawkes, plotted to blow up the Palace of Westminster on November the 5th, along with King James I and his family, in a desperate attempt to overthrow the government and reinstate freedom for Catholics to worship without penalty. The Gunpowder Plot failed, and many of the conspirators fled to Huddington Court, where they sat all night in the dark by the fire in the Great Hall, watching as the embers burned down. A contemporary account tells us that the men spoke quietly to each other, and at dawn received absolution for their sins from a priest before riding off into the countryside. All were captured and killed in the following weeks. Robert Wintour managed to evade the government forces for 2 months, living rough in barns and outhouses, before his location was eventually betrayed. He was hanged, drawn and quartered on January the 30th, 1606, outside St Paul's Cathedral in London. The Wintour name was disgraced, and Helena's family suffered severe financial penalties. Helena's mother, Gertrude, was left grief-stricken by her husband's death. A family story tells us that she engraved a motto on a window at Huddington, saying that she was beyond grief, beyond care. Gertrude would have been in her 30s when she was left to bring up 4 young children. Helena seems to have shouldered much responsibility, helping her mother to run the household, despite being so very young. Gertrude taught Helena as much domestic management, including embroidery, as possible before she succumbed to grief and died when Helena was about 9 years old. Until Helena's brother John was old enough to take on the care of his sisters and the estate, the tightly knit Catholic community helped to bring up the orphaned Wintour children. When Helena was 15, her older brother John married. He had managed to scrape enough money together to restore the family finances, and he brought his new wife, Frances, to live at Huddington Court with his 3 younger sisters. Helena helped to run the household and to look after her little sister Catherine. In 1617, her sister Mary left England to join a Catholic convent in the Low Countries, although her poor health was to lead to her early death at the age of 25. Helena was now in her teens, and it was widely expected that she would marry and move to a new home or follow in Mary's footsteps by joining a convent. Women in those times were not seen as being able to lead independent lives and were subjected to the male authority of a father, an older brother, or a husband. Helena was domestically capable, well-educated, devout, and moderately wealthy. She was a highly attractive prospect as a bride amongst her Catholic peers. However, she chose to remain unmarried. It may well be that the tragedy and family loss that continued to shape Helena's life played a major part in her decision. In 1622, her brother John died unexpectedly, leaving 3 young sons, John, Robert, and baby George. Helena, then in her early 20s, took over the role as steward of the Huddington estate and chief carer for her 3 nephews. By 1630, the 8-year-old George was the only surviving child, both John and Robert having succumbed to childhood illnesses. The last mention of George's mother, Frances, also occurs about this time, and it appears that Helena took over George's upbringing, education, and management of his financial affairs from then on. At the age of 30, Helena was now deemed to be too old for marriage. Perhaps in taking on the care of George and his brothers, and in the management of the estate, she found sufficient outlet for her maternal feelings and her considerable energy. Perhaps she had also come to value her independence and the freedom it gave her. Around the age of 8, George was sent away to be educated by the English Jesuits at the prestigious College of St. Omer's, not far from Calais. This was the only option for formal education available to English recusants at that time, as Catholics were banned from teaching or running schools in England. They were also prohibited from sending their sons abroad to receive a Catholic education. So young George made the journey across the Channel under an assumed name in the care of a disguised Jesuit priest. At St. Omer's, he embarked on a life of serious study: Latin, Greek, classical and English literature, history, mathematics, and the new sciences of astronomy. He learned music, dancing, deportment, and would have taken part in the many prestigious dramatic performances for which the college was famous. George also learned the ways in which he could surreptitiously maintain his Catholic faith when he returned home to England, where his religion was still illegal. His aunt Helena managed the estates and devoted her free time to the study of spiritual works and Catholic literature. She was particularly drawn to the poetry of Robert Southwell and the sacred symbolic imagery to be found in Henry Hawkins' Parthenia Sacra. At the age of 18, George, now a young man, returned to Huddington, ready to take over the running of his family estates. Helena moved into Badge Court, about 5 miles away. George married 3 times before he was 21. His first and second wives, Frances Talbot and Mary Carrington, both died within a year of marriage, presumably in childbirth, leaving no surviving children. His third wife was Mary Kemp. Their only child, Joan, died around the age of 5. During the English Civil War, George distinguished himself in the service of King Charles I and was knighted. But when the king was executed and Oliver Cromwell established the Commonwealth government, George was imprisoned for his royalist support. His Aunt Helena visited him in prison, bringing food and comforts, but the years of incarceration broke George's health, and he died in 1658 at the age of 36. His widow, Lady Mary Wintour, inherited George's numerous debts and faced a precarious financial future. Helena had wisely saved her income for many years and paid the debts, providing Lady Mary with a substantial pension. However, Lady Mary did not repay her aunt by marriage or show any gratitude, proving to be a considerable thorn in Helena's side, with her constant demands for more money. Around the age of 30, Helena embarked on the design and creation of a remarkable, lavishly embroidered collection of Catholic vestments. These were very literal acts of defiance to the laws of the time, which banned the celebration of any Catholic liturgy, with severe penalties for those caught taking part. Helena surrounded herself with a group of like-minded friends and relations. Mary Talbot, Margaret Laican, Ellen Atmore and Jane Canning were all literate, educated women who helped Helena carry out her ambitious designs. Mary Talbot had been educated by English nuns at Liège, where she had learnt a complex embroidery technique using pearls and gold thread, which was unknown in England. She taught Helena the necessary skills, and the results were remarkable. Helena took her inspiration from nature, from formal gardens and flowers, as well as from spiritual books, including the Parthenia Sacra, which used images such as rainbows, dewdrops, gardens, hens and roses as symbols for the virtues of the Virgin Mary. Her work encoded Catholic prayers and hymns and used Jesuit devices and anagrams. Her embroidery was an act of devotion, accompanied by spiritual readings and prayer. Helena used rich fabrics such as scarlet, purple and white satin, black silk and green damask, and employed costly coloured silk, gold and silver threads, ribbons and laces. She dotted her work with brightly gilded sequins or spangles and raided her jewellery box for pearl and garnet earrings, enamelled gold ornaments, opals, seed pearls, rubies and diamonds. Helena's work was intricate and richly coloured, and it can be imagined that her vestments, worn by a priest in her forbidden chapel, would sparkle and glow, almost coming to life as the jewels, spangles, gold and silver threads caught the flickering candlelight. Helena had always intended that her life's work, as well as the property and money that she had managed to save, would be bequeathed to the English Jesuit priests whom she had known for so many years and who had provided her with spiritual comfort and guidance throughout the trials of her life. In 1668, a visiting Jesuit, Father George Gray, reported to his superior that Helena wished to leave the Jesuits a substantial sum of money and property to set up a small, secret school at a farm near to her home. The priest also noted, to his astonishment, that she was working on rich, embroidered church stuff, which she designs for this particular mission or intended college. By this date, at the age of 68, she had been creating embroideries for nearly 40 years. On the morning of May the 5th, 1671, Helena knew that her end was approaching, and she prepared a short will, which she signed, witnessed by her faithful friends Jane Atmore and Margaret Laican. The will clearly declared that she left all of her embroideries to the Jesuits, with the exception of one spangled chasuble, which was to go to her goddaughter, Ellen Atmore. Helena died later that afternoon. She was 71. Amazingly, Helena's will survived, and we can actually now read the words that she dictated on her deathbed and hear her voice through this paper. I do hereby declare that all the pictures in my house and most part of the books do belong to the Society, and the rest I do freely give to them. I do also leave and bequeath unto the said Society all the vestments and other altar ornaments thereto belonging, whereof I am at present possessed, given under my hand this 5th day of May, 1671. All this I declare as part of my last will and testament. No sooner was Helena dead than Lady Mary, George's widow, turned up at Badge Court, demanding that the vestments be given to her, and made a series of contradictory false claims. Mary first stated that the vestments had belonged to George's mother, and then to George, and then that she had made them herself, and finally that Helena had made them, but promised that Mary should have them after her death. Each claim was carefully refuted by Helena's lifelong friends, as well as by her doctor and her solicitor in a series of letters which have survived, to bear testament to the determination of Lady Mary to acquire Helena's work. She was of good and perfect memory and understanding when, of her free will and accord, she bequeathed that legacy to the Jesuits that she had in consequence directed Father Anthony Turner to take possession of the property in question, and for that purpose she released, acquitted and confirmed the same to him for the use of his order forever. Eventually, to avoid the danger of the row coming to the attention of the authorities, with potentially disastrous consequences for those Catholics involved, Father Anthony gave Lady Mary 4 of Helena's vestments, including the richly embroidered pearl chasuble. One of the most remarkable things about this story is that not only have the vestments themselves survived, but that so many letters and documents have been preserved along with them, including Helena's poignant will, with her faltering initials penned on the morning of her death. We can read the indignation of Mr. Wolsted, Helena's solicitor, who wrote of Mary that he wished Lady Mary Wintour the happiness of never having the vestments. There's also the story of Nell Atmore being reprimanded by the dying Helena for blocking her view with the words, "Wench, get out of the light." Lady Mary kept hold of the 4 vestments, and on her death in 1695 they passed to her relatives. The vestments stayed in her family until 1843, when they were given to a Benedictine community in the Cotswolds. They are now with the Benedictines at Dowie Abbey. The remaining vestments were used by the Jesuits at Helena's secret school as she wished, but had seemingly been lost by the middle of the 18th century. The vestments were rediscovered in 1854 at the Talbot family house at Grafton, which housed a small Jesuit community. The kitchen cat had delivered her kittens in what was thought to be a trunk full of rags in the attic. Closer inspection showed them to be Helena's missing vestments. The vestments were sent to Stonyhurst College in Lancashire, where they were lovingly conserved by the skillful hands of Brother James Horton, the Jesuit sacristan. Stonyhurst is the direct descendant of St Omer's, which was founded in 1593 and moved to its present site in Lancashire in 1794. St Omer's, of course, was George Wintour's school, so it seems an appropriate home for his Aunt Helena's embroideries. Helena, by all accounts, was a proud, strong and prickly woman who faced the many trials and sorrows of her life with courage, intelligence and faith. Her extraordinary, unique embroideries represent her personal, intellectual and creative defiance to the times in which she lived, countering state oppression with ingenuity, symbolism, beauty and artistry.